Cybercriminals have launched a series of cyber attacks on UK retailers, causing chaos for online customers and empty shelves in shops. Hackers targeted Marks & Spencer, the Co-op, and the world-renowned luxury department store Harrods. So, what group is behind the attacks, and can they be stopped? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, a group of hackers have infiltrated 3 major retailers in the UK in a widespread ransomware attack. Scattered Spider is the group believed to be behind the strikes. It's made up of mainly English-speaking teenagers and young adults based in the UK, Europe and the US. So, who are they and what do they want?
3 cyber attacks in the space of 2 weeks on some of the UK's biggest retailers is unprecedented. Cyber criminals have caused havoc for high street stores Marks & Spencer, the Co-op, and the latest victim is luxury department store Harrods. Marks & Spencer's, normally known for the quality of products, have been left with empty shelves and shut down online operations, costing them millions. The hackers are said to be notorious cyber criminals known as Scattered Spider. They first appeared in 2022 and have been linked to more than 100 targeted attacks across industries such as telecoms, finance, retail and gaming. Their goal? Financial extortion. In one of its most well-known hacks, Scattered Spider locked the networks of casino operators Caesars Entertainment and MGM Resorts International. It paid a ransom of $50 million to restore its network. The UK National Cybersecurity Centre has said the disruption caused by the recent incidents impacting the retail sector are naturally a cause for concern to those businesses affected, their customers and the public. The NCSC continues to work closely with organisations that have reported incidents to us to fully understand the nature of these attacks and to provide expert advice to the wider sector based on the threat picture. So what can be done to stop these cyber criminals infiltrating different industries?
Well, let's meet our guests who are all in Manchester in England today. Joining us, we have David Edmundson-Bird. He's Principal Lecturer in Digital Marketing and Faculty Lead in AI. That's at Manchester Metropolitan University. And Stephen Allan is the CEO of Linten Technologies. That's an IT support service company. Boys, you're all very welcome to Roundtable. Stephen, to you first. For all this talk about high tech and cyber hacking, what we understand so far about this Scattered Spider group is that they impersonated an employee, they rang the company's IT help desk to ask for support in changing a password, and that got them into the system. Very, very simple.
That's not uncommon. We see this all the time. These groups will take over people's mobile phone numbers so that they can present as if they're actually calling from that person, and try and trick people into giving them the data that they need to be able to gain access to systems. So it's definitely not uncommon.
David, they are fiendishly clever. I mean, they have all of the technology. They're able to get mobile numbers for staff. It's almost impossible to fight against them.
It is quite difficult, but they're not using anything particularly technical to do it. They're using very sly methods. It's all about fooling humans into doing what you want. And they've done this previously, and they've done it on this occasion as well.
And Stephen, to you, once they get into a system, they then insert what we hear is called ransomware, and that infects computers, steals data, destroys files, basically disrupts the IT operation of any big company.
They do. They insert their software to be able to gain access to information, but it's not just about that. It's actually about making sure they can secure their access into your systems as well. So if they've tricked one employee into allowing them access via that account, they'll then use that account to be able to make sure that they can execute things in the future by creating backdoors, inserting their own pieces of software, and sometimes even just sitting there for a period of time to monitor what happens and see what's normal in the business, so that they can then, when they do their attack, they can make their attack look normal to everybody that might be able to see it.
So, David, this must be every company and every chief executive's absolute worst nightmare, getting that phone call to say your IT system has been compromised?
Yeah, it would be extremely worrying for any managing director or chief exec who found themselves in this position. Organizations like Marks and Spencer's will have spent considerable sums of money and have plenty of people who have been looking after this. But it only takes one slip up by an employee who might not have been trained adequately or who might have simply forgotten what the rules are, and immediately these people are in, and all of that investment of time and money goes out of the window.
Stephen, give us your impression of this group then, calling themselves Scattered Spider. We understand they're a collective, they're teenage hackers. My first question is, are they doing it for money, or is this more ideological?
I think they probably start initially doing it for ideological reasons. They've grown up with technology. They've been used to it. They've found that they can do things, and then they've suddenly found that the notoriety that comes from it amongst their peers it spurs them on, and then they can see that there's actually money that can be made out of these things as well. So they're definitely doing it for money, though. In some cases, and probably very limited cases, they're perhaps doing it because they don't necessarily agree with some of the ethics of the company. But in nearly all cases, it's money motivated.
David, would you go along with that?
Yeah, I genuinely believe it money motivated, and there's a slight hint of there being an organized crime element to this as well. It is a disorganized group, if that's the best way to describe it. It's definitely driven around money, and it's not the first time that they've done it, and it's not just in this country that it's happened.
So, Stephen, the big question is, if you are a CEO and your company has been compromised by a group like this and they ask for a ransom, do you just pay the money?
Absolutely not. The advice is always not to pay the ransom. If you pay the ransom, they're just going to come back to you again and ask you for more money. And in some cases, they may promise and say, no, we're really ethical hackers, really. We're not going to come back to you for more money again. But what they will do is they'll just tell their colleagues and other people, other hackers out there, here's a soft target. You should go for them.
David, do you agree with that? Would you pay the money?
No, never pay the money. There's absolutely no guarantee that they're going to unlock the system. It's more likely that they're going to demand further money, and as mentioned, it's just going to continue and become worse.
Stephen, how hard is it to catch these people then? Because I guess they've got all sorts of firewalls and they've hidden absolutely every internet provider address going. They'll be smart people.
Well, the name says it all. They're scattered. So these people are not just coming from one location. They're not just coming from one internet address. They're all over the place. So there's no way of actually being able to easily pinpoint them. But they're coming together as a collective and working as a team. So if they're coming at a business from multiple different angles, it's nigh on impossible to pin down exactly where they're coming from and in turn catch them as well.
So David, just in terms of law enforcement, how well equipped do you think police forces are in the UK when it comes to hunting cyber criminals?
I think they're actually quite advanced in their thinking. There's been a lot of work done over the last few years working with police forces, and there are specialist groups who will be looking and exploring this now. The big problem is the sheer volume of work that's involved, and the fact that this attack might then start cascading to other businesses will make that job even more difficult to achieve.
So, Stephen, this really is a very futuristic crime, isn't it? Years ago, if people wanted to steal money, they went to a bank or a shop or a supermarket and they were robbers. And nowadays, the world we're in, they can start doing this at the click of a button.
Well, absolutely. And there was times gone by these hackers were actually writing code and manipulating things themselves. But these days, they're actually leveraging AI to be able to help them. So they've got all of the more sophisticated tools at their fingertips. And if you consider that businesses and law enforcement are having to use tried and tested tools that they know are not going to create damage, the hacker can write a bit of code in 5 minutes and deploy it. And they don't care if it damages anything, because if it does the job and it enables them to get their foot in the door, then they're going to do it. So they're always one cut ahead of people that are trying to protect businesses from these sort of crimes.
That's a good point, David, isn't it? That the law always seems to be behind the cyber criminals. They're always pushing ahead, new code, latest tech, and law enforcement is generally playing a catch-up game.
Yeah, I think that mirrors the situation with digital generally, that the law takes a little bit of time to catch up. I think where the police are hoping they're going to make an inroad is if one of the criminals slips up, gives away something, gets a bit too smart, starts to brag a little bit, and that might be the way in. But absolutely, they're always a little one step ahead.
So, Stephen, just in terms of catching these people, do you think it will take them to make a mistake first before we start seeing arrests?
That's where we've seen the arrest to date. It's when they make arrests, when they start to think that they're uncatchable, and they start cutting corners in their own checks that they're doing to make sure that they're not going to get caught. And they just get too big for the boots, really, and that's when they get caught. Right now, the technology doesn't really help us catch them. It helps us more prevent them being able to do any damage when they get in, or prevent them from getting in the first place.
And David, do you think all the media coverage, seeing their name in the newspapers and online, do you think that will be feeding the ego of these hackers? Like, is this ego driven as well?
It certainly can be. I mean, historically, hackers did a lot of these things for the sort of glory of it. You know, this particular case is probably driven around a crime spree to do with taking money. But it just takes one person to slip up, one person to need to brag for that little piece of information to then lead towards police identifying who these people are.
So, Stephen, if CEOs or IT leaders in industry are watching this roundtable, what advice would you give them to avoid ending up on the front pages like Marks and Spencer's in the UK, the Co-op, even Harrods?
I would suggest to them to ask their IT team or the company that they rely on for their IT, what could they be doing differently? Because quite often the IT companies and IT teams are advising the CEOs as to what they need to be doing in business, what they should be changing, what they should be investing in. And quite often it's the bottom line that's looked at and thought, well, we've always done it the way we have. We don't really need to spend this money, and don't necessarily understand the risks until they've had a problem. So it's about making sure that they fully understand the risks.
And Stephen, you've had phone calls the last week or two from companies looking for advice. How worried are they seeing everything play out for a huge company like M&S?
When small businesses who rely on the business on a day-to-day basis, and they suddenly are in a position where they're seeing this happening to the big boys, they're thinking, well, if it's happening to them, it could very easily happen to us. What do or should we have in place to make sure that this doesn't happen? And we've, as you quite rightly say, we've had a few phone calls from some of our clients asking us that very question. And there are solutions out there that they can look at, and it will help protect the businesses if they look at implementing them.
David, ultimately it all comes down to staff, doesn't it? Because so many emails, links, your staff need to be so well trained to spot phishing attacks, any way that ransomware can get into an IT system in a company. I mean, a company is only as strong as its weakest link.
That's absolutely true. I mean, this case is a perfect example of how it's not really a tech issue, it's a people issue. So businesses need to ensure that they have proper systems set up, proper processes that are bulletproof, that they train their staff effectively, that they keep training staff, that they do exercises to see where the weaknesses are, and to ensure that staff operate completely within the agreed procedures. And it's only with proper training and consistent testing that companies can avoid problems like this.
Stephen, would you echo that advice?
Absolutely. Training is key to everything. 99% of these attacks are as a result of human error, and that's not intentional human error. It's people being tricked or coerced into doing something they didn't intend to do. So training the people to make sure they can identify these threats or identify when somebody's trying to manipulate them is key to everything. And it's ongoing. It's not just a one-off exercise. It's something that needs to be done and continually done and tested.
David, do you think companies are finally getting the message that, it used to be that IT training was optional and, there was always a pressure on people to attend or do these online little click-by-click seminars where you finish and you get a score out of 10 to pass? I mean, we're into a very serious situation now where a company like M&S is seeing empty shelves because ransomware has got into the system.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a change in the culture of businesses that we don't leave the techie stuff for the techie people. That actually this is hardcore part of the business. It's what the business is made of, and when something is right at the heart of the business, particularly with Marks and Spencers and their e-commerce business, then it has to be something that everyone in the business has to be concerned with, and that's particularly important at the managing director, chief exec level, and everyone who sits on that board. It's everyone's responsibility, not just that of the IT director.
Stephen, how does Marks and Spencer come out of this now successfully? How do they get these people off their backs, get their IT system back secure, and get their shelves stocked?
In most cases, it's a rebuild of systems. If the systems have been infected and you don't know where the infection lies, the only way to deal with it is to purge it, reinstall it, and try and recover the data. And quite often that can be the data is infected because the hackers may have been in for a period of time. So it can be rekeying of information. So that's why we'll see companies like M&S have paused orders because they don't want any more data coming into a system which has got an infection in there until that they know they've got a clean, robust system to enable them to start trading again.
Well, Graham Stewart can join us now from Manchester as well. He's the head of public sector at Checkpoint. That's a cybersecurity firm. Graham, welcome to Roundtable. I was just saying to our guests that it's fascinating, the moral dilemma here facing a CEO of a company as big as Marks and Spencer. Do you pay the ransom? And both Stephen and David said absolutely, categorically, do not pay these people any money.
Yep, and I would agree. I would. So I've spent most of the last 25 years of my career working with public sector organisations, and the line from government to public sector has always been effectively, we don't deal with terrorists, so do not engage and do not do that. That being said, I'm aware in the private sector that that's potentially not as a clear-cut an issue, and that there is, evidence that that's not always been the case.
And Graham, just tell us, how long do you think it'll be before the police catch up with Scattered Spider, as they call themselves?
I'd be surprised if the security services didn't know exactly who these people are. I would be even more surprised, however, given the distributed nature of these organisations. So think of them as a co-op, and they're geographically disparate. I think it'll be a while before they catch up with them. So there were comments about some of the guys in the gang that were caught before. And the way to think of Scattered Spider is a bit like a jazz band, right? So you've got a core number of members, and then people leaving and joining, and someone comes in and does a bit, and then someone leaves again. By its very distributed nature, you might pick up one or two people, but I don't see them picking up everybody in this gang.
Graham, I was asking Stephen and David there about advice to companies who may not have the scale and the resources of Marks and Spencer. I'm guessing a lot of senior leaders in business worldwide will be looking at this and thinking, wow, if a company the size of M&S can get hit, we really need to up our game.
Yeah, and the advice that from my sort of industry side is cybersecurity fits into three different areas, three different categories: people, process, technology. So an organization like mine, Checkpoint, will supply you with the technology and can help advise you on the process. But ultimately, you have to get your business processes right and you have to get your people trained up and your people understanding what's going on. And what appears to have happened in these attacks is that's the point of weakness within these organizations, that's the point where these guys made their entry. So people, process, technology are the three fundamentals, the magic triangle, as we call it.
And David, all too often, we hear about human error. Marks and Spencer employ tens of thousands of people across the United Kingdom. I mean, it just takes one employee to have one momentary lapse to click on a link and they're in.
Yeah, it's so easy to make that mistake. And I suspect it's not just a single person. I suspect there's more than one person who's been doing that. And that's why it's important to have exercises regularly where you test the reliability of staff, and where those staff make mistakes, you introduce that opportunity for training so that you can get rid of those errors in future.
Stephen, in your experience, these kind of people who hack and do this kind of cyber terrorism really is what it is. Do they fear the law? Do they fear being caught? Or are they so ego-driven that they think they'll never be caught?
Because so many don't get caught, they don't fear being caught. They're very remote from where they're doing this. They could be the other side of the world. So they don't fear the law in this sense.
Graham, would you echo that in your experience? Build a psychological profile for us.
I think the way to view this is the modern day bank heist, right? So this is the guys who used to knock off the bank vaults. You've seen them in the films, pulling up outside in the van, doing all that kind of stuff. They weren't thinking about getting caught. The mentality behind this, and again, you want to split these into the people, the different types of organizations, the different types of groups of people. And there's really 4 different types of groups that do this. So you've got the hobbyists, and if you look at there's kind of a lazy trope of a kind of teenager in a hoodie. You've got nation state actors, so you've got Iran, North Korea, et cetera, that are going after critical national infrastructure and the like, but also causing disruption. Then in between that, you've got the kind of mercenary gangs that work for, that get hired by nation state and organizations. But this appears to be the 4th group, which is simply the guys doing the modern day bank heist, and they are in it for the money. They're in it for the notoriety. There's no small amount of machismo involved in this kind of effort, and that's a big driver in this. So I really don't think that they give a hoot about getting caught. If I'm honest with you, I think it's part of the thrill of doing it, in the same way that the bank heist of times past was the thrill of that. Was not just the money, but the thrill of the heist itself. And I really think that's the kind of mentality that sits in this space.
David, clearly there is money to be made in this. Some companies must have paid out over the years, or these hackers would not still be doing what they're doing.
There are stories of people who have paid out. I don't know at what level of success in terms of whether things have been sorted out. But obviously the rules are different for different people. Some people have felt that it would be better to pay in the long run. It's really not clear whether any benefits come from that. And the advice is don't pay.
Stephen, is the law as it stands tough enough to deal with these people when they are eventually caught?
I'm not versed in exactly how the law would deal with them when they catch them, because generally they're in different jurisdictions. And it's a lot more complicated than just catching somebody in the UK. It's not just the teenager in the bedroom. Of course, they do get the wrath of the law when these things happen. But these collectives, there isn't really many cases that we can look at where they've all actually been caught and they've been able to be stopped. Because as it's been pointed out here, they do tend to have lots of transient people coming in and out of these groups and working, so they'll get an industry expert that they need to be able to target a particular sector. Then that person leaves the group once that exercise has been done. So I don't think it is the case at all, no.
Graham, final point to you. If the chief exec of Marks and Spencer rang you up and said, give me some advice, please, how do I handle this? What do I do? What would you say?
tighten up your processes. So the guys at M&S, and I know some of the team at M&S are some of the hardest working and some of the best people in the cybersecurity space. What's let them down here is process, because you can't blame people, because you can't blame someone working in an HR department or in logistics department. Their job is not cybersecurity. Their job is logistics and HR. I would say that get your processes right. Think about what's going on. Think about the exposure of your people to systems, and do they need to have exposure to systems? I would come back to a point you asked a moment ago, which was about the not paying. I'm very aware that the answer is don't pay. You shouldn't pay. But I'm aware that there is a fully fledged process for people to pay these ransoms, and they've been very successful when they've paid these ransoms, because it's in the business interests of these ransomware gangs and cyber criminals to actually make it work. Because if they don't unscramble the information, they don't have a business model. And Bino, under any misapprehension, this is a business model that they're running. And so there is a whole mechanism for these ransoms to be paid. And I'm aware of at least 2 or 3 household names that have done it.
That's fascinating. Graham, thank you so much for your insights. Stephen and David as well, all of you in Manchester. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.